Memorabilia of all sorts is scattered throughout your home. Unorganized in unmarked boxes. You might not even know exactly what you have. These pieces of the past might be riddled with guilt. Memory boxes can be a part of the answer, and I'm going to show you a peek of mine at the end of this video, so stay tuned. I'm Dara. I help people live a more minimalist lifestyle so they can focus on what matters most without getting overwhelmed along the way. If you'd like to live a simpler life, stay tuned for more videos like this one. Memorabilia can be one of the most difficult categories of items that I go through with my clients. So it's important that we talk about the following today. 1, what is memorabilia? 2, what to do with it. 3, take a peek inside my memory box. Memorabilia are all those items that have some sort of significance in your life as it relates to a person, an event that occurred in your life, or something else that reminds you of something in your life, maybe a time or a place. One of the issues with memorabilia is that we infuse it with meaning. We put so much emotion and so much attachment, therefore, into these objects that memorabilia become more than just what they are. So if it is a piece of jewelry, let's say, passed down from a relative of yours, that piece of jewelry isn't just the jewelry itself, it's all of the emotion surrounding your relationship with that person. It might remind you of that person. It might remind you of the time they gave it to you. You might actually hate the item. In my case, I love these earrings, but in some cases, we don't actually like these pieces that represent in our minds individuals in our life. If we're not talking about people, but we're talking about places or events, it might be a trophy one or a picture of an old apartment you used to live in. These types of objects might hold emotions as well. And even though it might not come with the same level of guilt in getting rid of them because they're not related to a person you know and you aren't afraid of offending them, they also have a great deal of emotion within them, and that's why we get attached and why it's difficult to get rid of pieces of memorabilia that no longer serve us. Just because something existed does not mean that it should be kept. And this goes for things that were created hundreds of years ago to something created last week. Oftentimes memorabilia is saved purely for some sort of historical or reasons that just relate to how long it's been around. I also find that sometimes my clients consider themselves sort of the family historian. They've crowned themselves with this purpose of holding on to objects that relate to their family and their family heritage. What I also find is that this person is usually not assigned that role by any other member in their family. This is something they assign for themselves. And so they do take on a fair amount of responsibility, but really it's the desire that they have personally. So if you're one of those historians out there, those family historians, please take a moment to really think about whether or not you're doing this for the family or if these are just items that you really like, which is totally fine. I also find that clients will save scraps of memorabilia, let's say brochures from a vacation that they took, or other pieces of ephemera, just small things that they someday want to put into a scrapbook. Now, what typically happens is the scrapbook might be purchased, things to do scrapbooking might be purchased, and all the memorabilia is in their home, and this has been sitting around for years. It means that this is a project you think you want to do, but you don't actually want to do. If you wanted to do it, you would have done it by now. We often have these ideas of presenting and compiling memorabilia in a particular way, but the truth is we rarely look at memorabilia and we rarely take the time to do these sorts of projects. Another type of memorabilia is the I just always had this type. This comes up a lot. There are these certain pieces that we keep typically from our childhood. They're just things that kind of come to represent us, but they're not always meaningful, and they may have been 10 or 15 years ago, but they aren't anymore. So these just because memorabilia, because it feels kind of weird to let them go, these are the types of memorabilia to take a second look at as well. Now, some memorabilia are items that you either look at regularly or you use functionally or decoratively in your home. These are great pieces of memorabilia to retain. I always recommend going through pieces again, making sure you really use them, that you really love them, that you're not keeping them out of guilt or emotional attachment. But if you're actually using them in your space, that's wonderful. We'll talk more about that later. Please comment below if you have another reason why you keep memorabilia. So what do you do with memorabilia? I mentioned just before that it can be used functionally in your home for decoration or as a piece of art or a scrapbook that you regularly look at and is a part of your life. So this will come as no surprise to you. One of the best things to do with memorabilia is to say goodbye to it. I say this mostly because it's typically not something that's well incorporated into one's life, looked at, used in any way. If it's memorabilia, if you're keeping it mostly because it represents a memory, then there's a very good chance that you don't want or need it enough that it's worth keeping. Also, sometimes we keep memorabilia that makes us think of painful events, sad events, things that just don't make us feel very good. These are all pieces to consider getting rid of. I'm not saying get rid of all your memorabilia, but I am saying that this is a great time to start looking through it and making sure that it is something worth keeping. One way to determine if it's something worth keeping is to figure out if it really does have value to you. It might have monetary value. Maybe it is something that's been passed along, you don't like it, you don't want it anymore. You might be able to sell it and make a little bit of money. Cha-ching. Or maybe you thought it had value to you, or it did at some point in time, but it just doesn't anymore, and that's okay. That's a great reason to let something go. If you have a large number of items from, let's say, one relative or somebody that you really care about, a friend, maybe a friend that's passed away, it is a wonderful thing to have something that represents them that you can incorporate into your life as a beautiful memory. But you don't need to keep everything from somebody else. So I recommend just picking one or two items that really represent that person and fill you with tremendous joy. Those are the items to keep. Maybe one of those items has a specific memory of an event that you shared with them, or maybe keep an item from somebody that has an additional piece of functionality. Maybe somebody left you a beautiful, beautiful serving dish, or somebody left you behind their treasured toolbox. These are all things that can be used in other aspects of your life that you can incorporate. One of the reasons that my clients have this memorabilia kind of stuck around and it's hard to get rid of is because it requires a conversation. Maybe a conversation with a family member, a conversation with a friend. Start having those conversations now. It's easier to do that when you're not surrounded by a pile of stuff that you have to go through. After you've gone through all the work of going through your memorabilia and figuring all of this out, you will probably be left with some items that aren't incorporated through functionality or through decoration of your home. You just have some items you just really want to keep somewhere. These items can go in a memory box. At this point in time, you can get a memory box. Get it down to exactly what you're keeping before purchasing anything. And be sure that it has a lid that fits securely depending on where you're keeping it. And make sure that it is clearly labeled, especially if you have multiple boxes or multiple people in your household. But when you put the things in your memory box, here's the good news. You don't need to organize what's in the box. As long as you labeled it with the general categories of things that are in it, you can actually just stuff it all in there. I always stress not to spend time over organizing things that you will then have to maintain in an organized way. You might be wondering where to keep the memory box. Well, according to almost anyone I've ever met, a memory box goes in a crawl space or a garage or an attic, and it's never covered tightly. It's in cardboard and rats and bugs get in it. Memory boxes are just relegated to the back of something. So people don't know where they are, they're not labeled well, they're not enclosed well. Here's the deal. If you have a memory box, it most likely belongs in your bedroom closet. Bedrooms are where personal items go. It keeps things really, really simple. So in your closet, find a nook, find an area. It doesn't need to be very accessible, but you at least want to be able to see that it is there. And if you can't fit your memory boxes in those types of places like a linen closet or a bedroom closet, and you have to stuff it somewhere like a garage or an attic, my guess is that you have too much stuff in your home and perhaps too many memory boxes. So what's the best type of memory box? No memory box. If you could go without one, that's great. In fact, if you consider yourself to be somebody who is not sentimental, that's gonna make the whole downsizing minimalism process way easier. And I have to tell you, some people believe that it's bad not to be sentimental, that they should be more sentimental about things. Well, let me just tell you, at Less Equals More, we do not believe in shoulds, and you shouldn't be anything other than who you are. Okay, are you ready to look at some of the objects in my memory box? Let me go and get it. Here it is. It looks a little bit bigger on the camera, but it's not quite full. Let me show you a few things I have in here. A cassette mixtape that a very special person made for me. Songs handwritten on the back. One of those cute fortune teller things that one of my nieces made for me. A very random and sort of strange placard that was on my bedroom wall when I was a baby, and it describes the definition of my name, Dara. A gavel. I'm not gonna even bother trying to explain this. Cards that people who are very important to me sent me that mean a lot, and I do read through these. My yearbook, old licenses and ID cards, a box of matches from a very special night, another matchbook from a special time. While it can be wonderful to store items of memorabilia in your home, just make sure you're being intentional about it. Erase the guilt and the emotional attachment and focus on what's most meaningful. For more information about minimalism and how to make your life easier, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell to be notified when a new video releases. And don't forget to check out all the resources listed below.